Hi there, welcome to our holiday episode of Play the Game, the podcast. Hope you enjoy our fine festive set.
We have spared no expense.
On this episode, Dave and I will be discussing the merits of Dicetown and Snowtails in Play. We'll head over to the Chicago Games Dice Dojo for a little sit-down chat with Lex in Shop Talk.
We'll also be going to Navy Pier to catch the annual Chicago Toy and Game Fair, where we'll meet an ambitious young game designer and take a look at some fun and new exciting games and toys for all the little girls and boys.
We've got another small job with John, where we'll actually get some paint on a Mini.
No kidding.
No kidding. And some really exciting stuff. Plus, we put out the question, what got you into gaming, to some game designers.
And we have a Scrabblicious new Pimp Your Game entry.
All here on Play the Game.
So the holidays are here, and we've killed the turkey and fattened our family and friends.
Now it's time to shut ourselves inside and away from the elements, shun the sunlight, and play some games.
But before we do that, let's head over to Navy Pier and see what all the fuss was about at this year's Chicago Toy and Game Fair.
Okay.
And what's the game you have today?
The game is Top Trumps. Essentially what it is, it's an educational kids card game. And it's a little bit like War meets Trivial Pursuit. So the game itself is actually a game that's been around, the brand has been around for over 50 years. It started over in England. And like us here in the US, where we grew up with the game of War or the game of Uno, they grew up with the game of Top Trumps. So brought it over here to America about 3.5 years ago. I say that there's actually a variety of cards. So in the case of, let me show you an easy one. In the case of like dogs, for example. So here with the dog pack, you've got a picture of the dog and you've got categories. The game itself is played a bit like War, where you choose a category, the highest number wins. So that's the element that's like War. Trivial Pursuit is that every card has a little factoid bio on it. So it doesn't matter if you're playing the game of dogs, if you're playing the game of Marvel, everything has a bio and fact numbers. So it's a little bit like War on steroids, because it's not where the ace just always wins. In this case, you actually choose the category that you want to play with. So if I were playing the game Predators, I'd look at my grizzly bear, I'd choose the category that I think I would want to win at. Killer rating would be one. I'd read out killer rating. Everybody else would read out their killer rating. Whoever has the highest number wins. Takes that card. The game keeps going until somebody has all the games in the pack.
Hi, I'm Bill Witt, and I am the Chief Pajagler for Pajagler Incorporated. And we manufacture a spatial recognition game that is for all ages. If you were to look at Pajagler, think of it like a modern day classic game. We have chess, we have checkers, and now we have Pajagler. Age range, probably between 7 and 97 years old. Pajagler is one of those things that when you play Pajagler, you believe it's easy. And then when you play, you realize this is not. And then you want to play again to prove to yourself that it is an easier game. Well, 1 hour and 2 hours and 3 hours, there's this inherent good feeling about playing Pajagler. If you remember back time, Hasbro created a great title called Perfection. Well, Pajagler is perfection on steroids. It's much more widespread. It's not an individual game. I can play in a time setting. I can play with a group of party where I've got multiple boards, dump all the pieces in the center, and now I've got this kind of party experience in chaos. Or for those that want to play a little strategy, great games like Block and Bridge and Triad, play on a Pajagle board that is no different than a deck of cards. That's what makes Pajagle so unique. And Pajagle is the only game that is built in America. Now I say only game, there are other games that are cardstock. We are the only plastic board game that's built in America. We're pretty proud of that, and we'd love to have people this year enjoy the game in years to come.
My name is Nick Metzler, and I invented Squash. The concept behind my game is to be the last one standing at the end. And the way to do that is to squash all other pawns on the cube. There are two ways to squash pawns. The first way is to make it to the 4 spots around the king. This allows you to flip the entire cube, squashing whoever is underneath at that point. The other way is to move directly into another pawn. Last year I entered in the competition and I made That's Cheating. And that game centered around the philosophy that cheaters actually do win. I rigged the game so that cheaters would have a better chance of winning rather than the people who actually follow the rules. Last year I thought cards were a little bit difficult to use and difficult to implement into the game, so I took out the cards for this game and I used dice and magnetic pieces. I think this game is good because it kind of varies between strategy and luck. There is a lot of strategy in this game, and all the strategy can be trumped by luck, so it makes it very equal for any player to compete and possibly win. I usually do. I'm a huge fan of all strategy games, but I've realized that not a ton of other people are, and other people also want a chance to win, even if they don't know how to play the game the best. So I usually throw in a luck factor to introduce the possibility of them getting lucky and winning. I try and think about including a new concept. I've made about 20 board games as of now, and I've tried to include a different concept in each. For example, That's Cheating was cheaters actually do win. This one, it's squashing to win and using magnetic pieces. And so I try and bring in a new aspect to every game I create, and this game was one of the first 3-dimensional games I've made.
I'm Carrie Martinez, and I teach ALPS at Palos West Elementary School in Palos Park, Illinois.
Hi, I'm Julie McNamara, and I'm the ALPS teacher at Palos East School at Palos Heights in Illinois. We're at the Young Inventors Challenge at the Chicago Toy and Game Fair.
Well, children love to play games, and when they found out of it, they were truly inspired to create their own toy or game. So we had, they had brought in their own games that they are fond of, even from their younger childhood days. And I think just, by play, it's a great way to, spark their imagination.
And being a local event, we thought it would be great for our students to come here to maybe hear and participate in it. Yes, we will be back here next year with our students.
Absolutely. The kids are already talking about coming back next year.
They're all social games. They play. All you need to play any of our games is a table and what comes in the pouch. That's what makes them so easy and social, and they bring families together, and they're over pretty quickly as well. So there's no time for stress to build up, to get angry, got to be waiting for somebody to take their turn. These are the games you want to be playing.
Well, that was a fun weekend. There's a lot to see, and it was great getting to meet some of those inventors. It's always nice to meet people just as they're getting into gaming and find out their reasons for enjoying the hobby. Oh, and hey, speaking of which...
Well, that was a great segue.
I thought so.
Anyway, without further ado, here is this episode's question.
I sort of backed into it a little bit. I did marketing and finance, which is about as far away as you can get from the game industry, really. Except I was a painter. I gamed in college. I played with miniatures in college, got into painting, then got into competitive painting. And when this company was starting up, they needed a painter, so I got involved there. got deeper and deeper until the next thing I knew I was writing a game.
Well, I started out in role-playing games when I was about 10 years old. Played those for years. Went to the military, spent a lot of time in there reading comic books and pretending to be a superhero in my own little way. And when I got out, I started working for Spin Master. It's been a great experience.
So personally, I've been gaming all my life, and very quickly, probably at the age of 8, I started making my own games rather than just playing games. And it starts with, you know, we had a chessboard and we'd play chess and checkers on it, but I started playing with my action figures on it. For toys and stuff, you know, it always felt like I could create battles creatively and, you know, that kind of stuff, but I always wanted some kind of way for it to make sense. So we started getting dice and cards, and when I say we, I mean my brother and I. He and I started this company, and so we've obviously known each other a long time. And so since we were kids, we would make rules for how to play with our army men or G.I. Joes or whatever, using dice or flipping like a deck of cards or things like that.
My family got me into gaming very young. As I grew into young adulthood, Dungeons & Dragons in the late 70s appeared, and I asked for it, not knowing what's in the box, and lo and behold, you know, I'm here 30 years later.
Thanks to everyone for taking the time to answer our questions. You can expect some wonderful and exciting presents to show up on your door.
Whoa, no.
What?
No presents.
We didn't get them anything?
No, we don't have a budget.
We don't have a budget?
$0 in the bank account, no budget.
How am I getting paid?
You're getting paid? I haven't seen a check yet. Did you get a check?
How am I going to pay for the food for my pony?
Well, why did you buy a pony?
To keep my ocelot company.
Why would you buy an ocelot?
Have you seen them?
Well, I have seen them on YouTube. They're pretty cute.
They're very pretty. I think I'm going to have to go call the bank.
It's not... All right. Well, Marty goes and handles his animal husbandry, whatnot. We're going to hop up to Dice Dojo, visit with Lex on this week's Shop Talk. And, dude, you can have a pony. You just can't afford to feed it.
That's terrible.
It'll be a skinny pony.
My name is Lex Dunning. I'm one of the co-owners of the Chicagoland Games Dice Dojo here on the north side. We've been open since we opened Halloween of 2008. So in the worst part of the worst depression, we decided it would be a good idea to open up a small independent game store, and we did. I used to work at Gamers Paradise, so I was, along with one of the other original owners, was in the industry, and I've been gaming for a while. So we always said we knew how to do it better than the place we worked, and we put our money where our mouth was. Well, a small percentage of the original community was certainly waiting for us to open up, but no, it was amazing. Once we opened up, when we opened up here in the Edgewater, the gamers found us instantly. It's like they were living here, they didn't have a place to go, but they were searching for a community to call their own, and we happened to fill that need pretty quickly. I'm a 20-plus year gamer. My dad designed board games in the 80s, so I got to grow up going to gaming conventions and miniatures events and all of that sort of thing. I was a role player from when I was about in the 4th grade, so I was pretty deep into it anyway. I made the mistake of taking a part-time job at a game store in graduate school because I didn't get a TA fellowship one semester, and that was really all she wrote. It was just as satisfying to work inside of my hobbies as what I was busting my butt to do in graduate school. So that sort of so now I'm a grotesquely overqualified historical war gamer. But the success we enjoyed as a store was everything about community events. We'd put up a couple of cheap folding tables, and we'd run a card tournament, or allow people to role play, or do some board game demos, and lo and behold, there was phenomenal success associated with actually making contact with your customer base and playing something they wanted to play instead of shilling like you were inside of a mall. So the idea was to do that on a macro scale, to create an actual gaming community the way we remembered them in the 80s, which, of course they were never really like, but that was the best part about them too. So our current shop and the original shop we had, half the retail space is dedicated to play space. It's tables, it's chairs, it's giving people a community gathering place to play games. We provide hundreds of free games so that people can actually play in the shop, meet each other, learn rules, because it's terrible learning games out of a rule book. That's not the experience that anybody is playing analog games for. We also wanted to provide a game shop that catered exclusively to analog stuff, not to do any of the video games or anything like that, because we think that is a specialty niche market, and by and large, it has really worked. We have an event every night of the week of some kind, of one degree or another, but for example, you brought up D&D. Our D&D meetups are run by organized play. They're run by the cows, so you have like 6 tables of D&D and Pathfinder. But they're open to everybody. They're not like a closed D&D campaign. You sign up online, you show up, you have a character. There's no commitment beyond that one night. So if you have a schedule that's difficult to make, you can always come in on Monday night and do that. There are a lot of home groups that meet, not necessarily on Mondays. But they'd schedule a little bit differently. Wednesday night is always our board gaming night. You can always come in and play a game. We have 700 titles on the wall. You can come and grab them and play them in the shop. You can bring your own stuff. That's much more of an open play environment. Basically, during the day, anyone that wants to show up, when there's not something scheduled, can just play, because we're not using the space for anything else. The strict controlling is more like on Friday night. We have 50, 60 Magic players in here. We can't have a lot of board games going on. But by and large, we facilitate open playing in any way we can, because that's what we want to be doing. COWS is an organization of role players called the Chicago Order of Weekend Screwballs. I think they've been around for 20 years in the Chicagoland area, running organized role-playing events, lots of Dungeons & Dragons, Pathfinder, all that sort of stuff now. They originally were an RPGA organization. I think in the early 90s, they were doing a lot of the Living Greyhawk and that kind of events. They game all over the place, but they're local chapters in pretty much all of the suburbs, as well as the city itself. They're an example of the kind of existing gaming organization that we really wanted to make contact with and integrate into the community. And now we have dozens of them. We reached out to any organization that was running games or looking for space or facilitating. For example, on the role-playing side, we sought out the Camarilla because we knew they organized vampire LARP events. We went to meetup.com and we found the Chicago board game meetup group, and we said, hey, we have all these board games. You are looking for places to play, and you're looking for matching gamers to games geographically. As soon as people found us, they were obviously willing to attach themselves to a store, because that's what the real problem with gaming is: finding a place to play and finding like-minded gamers. Everybody games with their friends, but different friends have different preferences. Somebody doesn't like a economics-driven hardcore board game. Some people like something lighter. Finding something to match your taste, and particularly without a lot of pre-planning, is sort of the nature of modern board gaming. The slogan we both love and regret the most is the store slogan that we don't close until the game is over, which has often proved very late. Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, we're always open till at least midnight, because that's when the formal games run to. We frequently go beyond that. Friday night, we frequently go beyond midnight. Saturday night is often in that territory. The rest of the nights, we try and close by 10 in an effort to stay married, but it doesn't always work out that way. But basically, we're going to keep we're going to keep playing until games come to a logical conclusion, unless people are just hanging around and wasting time or something. Why do we do that? Is that insane? Yes, but we do it because most gamers, have a 9-to-5 job. So saying that open play can only exist between 8 and 4 is not tremendously useful. Gamers game at night. Gamers tend to be nocturnal, so we unfortunately facilitate that. Oh no, this is the golden age of board games as far as I'm concerned. There are more games being made than have ever been made. I actually think, as we talked about earlier, there's actually more platforms for board gaming than there are for video games. Who would ever have imagined that there was a greater variety available to board game designers than video gamers that could ostensibly create anything they like digitally, but really there seem to be 3 or 4 types of video games, at least, that are viable to make. But board games despite being two-dimensional, you can do almost anything with now, and it's really great to watch. The infusion of Euro games into the American market has really blown up. It's fantastic.
Thanks to Lex and the Dice Dojo for taking the time to talk with us. Oh, hey.
Situation's resolved.
Oh, right on.
Sorry you won't be getting any presents from us. Seems I was misinformed about something.
We were not misinformed. You were making all that up.
Whatever. Okay, so let's talk about some games.
All right, so here's what's in play.
In play?
In play.
Yeah! Mush! Howdy, folks. What we've got here is the rootinest, tootinest dice rolling game this here side of the Mississippi. It's a good old game called Dice Town. The goal of which is to win enough victory points to be the baddest hombre to ever walk the streets of this little old town.
Yeehaw.
And you can do that a whole mess of different ways. Let me break it all down for you real easy. So, you start off with this here bullet head, or cup. And there are 5 dice that you take, and $8 that you start with. On the board, you've got various establishments and fine folks looking to provide you with services or sell you land, or hell, even make you sheriff. To do all this, you take your 5 dice and you dump them in your bullet head, or your cup, and you shake them up real good. Once they're good and shook, you slam them down on the table, take a peek at what you've got, making sure you don't let none of them dang varmints that are playing with you see what you're playing with. And now here's where you've got to make a decision. You can keep one of the dice and re-roll all the others, or you can pay $1 per dice to keep some extra. Your goal is to beat the other players for the various options around the town. If you get the highest number of any one die face, you get yourself a little prize. I'll go into that in a moment. Keep in mind, you are always trying to build a better hand. You keep rolling until one player has decided to keep all 5 dice. Once this has happened, you've got one last round to circle your wagons and get the dice you want. You don't have to pay for the last round, you just keep the dice. You then tally up what you've got. Across the board, there are multiple folks you can try to get goods from. There's the gold mine, where for every 9 you get, you can take a gold nugget. Nice. There's the bank, which with 10s, you can rob, getting some much needed cash. Always important. There's the general store, where with jacks you can get some goods and supplies, though with multiple jacks you can grab multiple cards. You can only keep one of those cards. The rest get discarded. There's the saloon, where with queens you can hire some saloon girls to steal cards from the other players. There's the sheriff, where with kings you can claim his badge. This gives you the ability to settle ties. The badge is also worth 5 victory points at the end. There's town hall, where if you have the best poker hand, you can grab yourself some of that much needed property. If you win this, every ace in your hand nets you an additional property claim, up to 3 total claims.
Sweet.
And lastly, if you were snake bit enough not to win anything, you can head on over to Doc Badluck. This traveling snake oil salesman will sell you barbed wire for your 9s and 10s, jacks and queens. He'll give you 1 good from the general store. Kings, he'll give you $2 from every other player at the table.
Sweet.
And for aces, he'll give you a gold nugget from every other player at the table.
That's good news.
You keep on in this fashion until either all of your golden nuggets is gone or the properties have all been claimed. Then you add up your dollars. Every $2 getting you 1 victory point. The gold nuggets are good for 1 victory point each. You check your cards, your general store cards sometimes giving you random bonuses, and then your property cards all have varied values of victory points. Factoring in who ends up with 5-point bonus from the sheriff, and the one with the highest amount of victory points wins the day. Yeah. The game is varied and allows for a lot of strategy as you try to outwit everyone else sitting at the table. It gives for plenty of opportunities to stare down your friends, and it's just an easy and fun time around the table. It's Dice Town. Take a moment, check it out.
Okay, well, we've had our first snowfall this year, minor though it was, and with the holidays upon us, we're going to have a few days off, and nothing screams fun like dog sleds! Dog sleds! Yes! And with that in mind, this is a great game for that time of year, the Lamont Brothers Snow Tales by Asmoday. A shout out to my friend Terry for turning me on to this game at Gen Con a couple of years ago. Terry likes games that don't last more than 4 hours, and this one really does fit the bill. I've played a lot of racing games. Some of them I liked, some of them I didn't, but very few capture any of the feeling of a race. But this game has something special. I think that as you play it, they've actually managed to recreate and simulate the feeling of your sled sliding all over the ice as you're racing. It's a simple mechanic of power distribution through the dogs on your sled. You have 2 dogs. And so here's how the game works. I'm not going to bore you with the setup. This is actually a contracted map. It's much longer. But the important thing is each player has a stack of canine cards with power values on them, ranging from 1 to 5, and break markers. Everyone shuffles their dog deck, and the player with the huskiest voice is the starting player.
Is that right, Dave?
Yes, Marty. The player with the second huskiest voice is next, and so on. If you're boring or introverted, you can decide randomly. The starting player picks the lane that they want and then puts their sled down. Then the next player puts his sled down in the lane he wants, and so on. Only 1 sled per lane is allowed. Each player draws 5 cards from the doggy deck. The players in the 4th and 5th lane, though, get bonus cards for the first round.
Okay.
The player in lane 4 gets 1 bonus card. The player in lane 5 gets 2. The nuts and bolts. You must play from 1 to 3 cards from the dog deck. They must be of the same value, either all 1s or all 4s. So obviously what's in your hand determines what you can lay down on your sled. Speed is determined by adding the power between the dogs and subtracting the break.
Okay.
So you place your cards on top of the dogs or the break. If you put a card down on a break, that is your new break value, and you take the old break value off and put the break value on the bottom of the sled here. But remember, you can only lay down cards of the same value if you want to do multiples. Okay? So that's where the simple mechanic takes over. I can choose to unbalance my sled in any way I want and cause one dog to pull harder to one side or the other, and that's where that sliding and drifting comes in, and that's the key to the game.
Okay.
There's also a way to have a balanced dog sled, so both dogs are pulling at the same rate. And if you do that, you get a bonus.
Okay.
And the bonus on points is determined by the actual place you are. So if you're in 5th place, you get 5 additional speed. But you have to take all the bonus or none of the bonus. Like, you can only take a few points. You got to do all or nothing.
Got it.
There's some nice ways to handle collisions in the game. You can put together some truly murderous racetracks, which is kind of cool, so the game has some legs. It plays 1 to 5, and each game lasts between about 45 minutes to an hour.
Nice.
And that's Snowtails.
When we last caught up with John, he was busy preparing his minis.
In this episode, we're going to be moving on to getting them painted and primed.
So take it away with the small jobs, John.
Welcome back to Small Jobs. Last time on Small Jobs, we worked on basing a military-type miniature. Today, we're in my garage, and we're going to prime it. A couple of things to remember when priming is to follow the manufacturer's instructions on the back of the can. The one thing I would actually add is to double the amount of shaking time that you add to the can. This is particularly important to the white and gray primers, because they tend to go on a little smoother. So if it says about a minute, shake it for about 2. Make sure you get the paint in the can pretty well mixed up. So let's get to it. All right, we've just finished shaking the paint for 2 minutes. At this point, we're going to put it on the miniature. Again, I'm following the instructions pretty much on the back of the can. I'm going to start spraying 10 to 12 inches away from the miniature. The important thing to note is that when I start spraying, I'm going to start outside the miniature, push the button, spray across the miniature, release. That again prevents us from having just the straight-on paint shot that tends to goop up the paint. The premise here is we're looking for a nice smooth coat of paint. So let's get to it. Shake in between. And you see we're getting a nice smooth coat of paint on it. All right, now we're going to work on the back of the guy. Paint's dried a little bit, so it's a little easy to pick up. Again, shaking in between strokes, and here we go. And that's it. Okay, we've just come up from the garage where we used our spray-on primer, and now we're going to do a brush-on primer. I talked about primers in one of our special segments on playthegamepodcast.com in our special segment section, so you can check it out there. One thing that I like to do when working with my miniatures is putting them on some sort of device or structure to hold them so that I can paint the miniature without getting my fingerprints all over the paint. scraping paint off. And my preferred methodology for that is a plastic bottle cap and a little bit of poster putty. So let's get her set up. So there she is on our little base. Notice I'll be able to get the brush to her without actually having to touch the miniature itself. So now onto our little bottle of brush on primer. I'm using Reaper currently. I'm going to put a little bit on a palette. In this case, I'm using a tile. And I'm using a rough, flat brush. Nothing special here, I just want to be able to get the primer onto it. What I'm also going to do is keep some water on hand. Again, I'm using bottled water, brand doesn't matter. I just want to make sure that it doesn't have any minerals from the tap water. I'll wet my brush a little bit. Get that into the paint. Make sure to work inside all the different nooks and crannies, the folds of cloth, armpits, wherever you can get the brush into. Okay, we have now primed our miniature. She's ready to go. We're going to, since we've primed her white, we're going to kind of keep a brighter color tone. I'm going to give her kind of a pale skin tone, and to accentuate that, we're going to go with maybe some blues and some greens. I'll probably make her blonde, so we'll have kind of this nice color play between the blues, the greens, and the yellow. In this case, I think blues, greens, and yellows are going to work kind of nicely. They're kind of in the same analogous color spectrum. We'll work it from there. What we're going to do first is lay down our base coat colors of each. The important thing to note is that you want a nice, clean, uniform cover of paint. So let's go through our color choices for this miniature. First, I'm going to start with a skin tone. So I'm actually using a Master Series high density Caucasian color. I kind of want to go middle of the road so that I can go higher on the highlights. So this is going to be kind of light to begin with, but we're going to go lighter on that with the highlights. For her hair color, I think I'll start with kind of a gold color to work up from there. And then for her clothing and cape, I'm going to use kind of a combination of almost a turquoise green and a purplish blue. I think I'll use the green colors for the clothing that she's wearing and the outside of her cape. I'll use the purplish blue for the inside of her cape. That way we get a nice color contrast between her and the clothing she's wearing. Just to mix things up, we're going to make her staff white, and going back to basics, we're going to make her sword silver. This way we get kind of a variation on how to highlight, shade, contrast a variety of different colors, including a metallic. And finally, last but not least, basic gray for the stone she's standing on. All right, let's get to painting her. In this case, I'm using a Winsor Newton Series 7 Zero Brush. I'm going to start by painting the skin tone and work inside, outside. So that means I'm going to start at the skin level and work my way out towards the clothing and her weapons and swords and that sort of thing. The reason you do this is that this way, if you slop some paint from maybe her face onto her hair, not a big problem, because then you'll paint her hair afterwards. You don't want to have to paint her hair, then slop skin color all over her hair after you've painted it so nicely. So, starting with the skin color on my palette here. Again, I'm just using a cheap 20-cent tile from a home improvement store. And we learned one of the neat things about the bottle paints is that sometimes you have to use a pin. Do not squeeze them because they have a tendency to explode if given the opportunity. So just use a pin to clear it. This is the high density paint, so it should go on in minimal coats. The important thing to note is that when painting your base coats on, 1 or 2 thin coats up to 3 thin coats are much better preferred than just 1 thick coat straight out of the bottle. So you see that I'll be dipping my brush into the water and adding just a little bit of water to it to thin out the paint. Notice we've got a good load of paint on the brush. If you want, you can check on your fingernail to see what kind of consistency it is and start bringing the paint in. Nice, even, continuous strokes, and it's okay if you go over some of the surrounding things because you're just going to paint them after the fact. You don't have to stay really into the lines, but it'll make it a little easier later. I guess one of the big discussions as to what constitutes a good paint thickness, as you saw when I painted it on my fingernail there, you want it thick enough to kind of have some body to it, but thin enough that it goes on smoothly. Alright, so that's the first pass of the skin color there. You can see that some of the primer is still kind of showing through, and that's why it's okay to do multiple passes on the base coats here. Again, 1 or 2 or 3 of the initial base coats are better than 1 big thick gloppy coat. Actually, that applies pretty much to everything you're going to be doing with the painting. It's better to have nice thin coats multiple times than 1 big thick one. So that was first pass, here's second pass. Alright, so there we have it. That is our first base coat of the skin tone. It's nice, smooth, looks relatively consistent overall. Now we're going to move on to the clothing that's right up against her. So for that, we're going to be using a kind of bluish green. Obviously, now that we're working on the next layer out, you got to be a little bit more careful as you're working in towards the skin. One of the nice things about working with acrylics is you really can't screw up. And worst case scenario, if you do screw up really horribly, you can always strip the paint off the miniature and start from the beginning. We now have a good contrast of the blues and greens. Their skin colors showing very nicely against the foreground colors. All right, at this point, we're starting to get into finer details. So I've got my fun goggles on. I'm going to be using a 00, probably a 000 brush as I go along here. First, we're going to touch up that staff, take care of her sword, and then quickly finish off her base. So that's our plan. And what's neat is you can start seeing how the miniatures work together and how our chosen color scheme plays well. And that's what it's looking like with the staff. Probably do 1 more coat on there just to cover up some of the remaining purple. But okay, our staff is pretty much painted at this point. I'm actually going to do her base first, and that's because I want to save the metallics for last. I'll explain that in a little bit. So let's hit the base. I'm just going to use plain old gray. Not really exciting, but it does what it needs to do. Tricky part here is to get around her feet. And obviously the base is generally the sloppiest because you aren't really paying attention to what's going on when you're painting everything else. Doesn't have to be really pretty because it's just the base, but you do want to cover up the previous splotches of color. And this is our finished base coating. At this point, we've got a nice, good, uniform color across all the different surfaces on her, and she's ready to go into the detail work. We'll probably start on shading. First thing up is probably going to be her face, which will be in our next segment. If you want to see the extended footage of the whole painting base coating process, please be sure to check out playthegamepodcast.com under the small job section. Check it out.
Thanks again, John. Awesome as always. Be sure to check out all of John's segments at playthegamepodcast.com. They're filed into the small job section of the website.
And now we've come to the portion of the show where we've been turning it over to you guys, our beloved audience. It's time to pimp your game.
Hi, and welcome to Pimp Your Game. This month we wanted to pimp the game Scrabble. We figured it's a game that's in almost every household, like Monopoly or Life, and while it's an old standard, it's pretty perfect for the holidays, as it's in almost every household, and almost every family member can play it.
There aren't a lot of skills required to play Scrabble. You only have to know how to spell, so it can appeal to everybody. There's also a junior edition so that the younger members of the family are able to play as well, and it's a pretty universal game.
Really fast-paced.
Now let's talk about some of the fun characters we meet playing Scrabble.
The thinker will use every last second available to them, sometimes as a way to distract the other players and take their focus off the game board. The vulture will quietly sit back and let you spell a 7-letter word. The vulture will simply add a prefix or a suffix to get all of your points all over again. The X-Man. This shrewd player may not spell the longest words, but will make use of the point multipliers or spelling 2 words at a time to maximize points. The Professor. This player makes constant use of the Scrabble dictionary and spells words that no one has ever seen outside of the Scrabble dictionary.
So no matter how you play the game, Scrabble's always a lot of fun.
So break it out with your family this holiday season. Thanks for watching. Happy holidays.
Thanks, guys. Scrabble. Who knew?
Apparently they did. Thank you very much for sharing that video with us. Now we'd just like the rest of you guys to do the same.
So come on, pimp your game.
And that'll just about do it for us this time through. Hopefully you've enjoyed this holiday extravaganza.
Be sure to check out the site, playthegamepodcast.com. We're constantly updating the site, so there's always something new to see.
Join our forums, leave some comments. We would love to hear your voices on how we can make the show and the site better.
Except for you, Kevin, age 10. You, sir, may need a little parental guidance.
Indeed. And remember, girls aren't icky.
It's true.
Agreed.
Also, be sure to friend and like us on Facebook.
Look for our tweets on Twitter under Play the Game Pod.
That's right. You can become one of our pod people.
One of us. And for all of us here at Play the Game, happy holidays.
And please have a happy
and safe New Year's.